Hey guys, welcome to this video. It's on the law of cosine. If you are in pre-cal, this is from 6.2, and if you are from trig, this is from 7.2. So if you have not watched my two previous videos on the law of sine, I suggest that you do first. A lot that I'm going to be mentioning in this video will be referencing back to that one. All right, so many things from the last videos from law of sine will stay the same. For example, our calculator will stay in degree mode. We are still using these for oblique triangles. And we will also still be making our chart. The difference is in our chart, we will not have a match this time. We won't get both A's, both B's, or both C's. All right, so we have two scenarios that will pop up with the law of cosine, and I drew these green arrows to help you with the formulas. Sorry that they're backwards there. All right, so if all three sides are given, then you're going to want to find the largest angle first. Okay, so here I have my formulas depending on which angle you're going to find. And here's where you would plug in the information from the sides and just jot that into your calculator. All right, and then if two sides and one angle are given, with no matches of course, then you're going to be finding the side first. And that's this main formula up here. So you would plug in the two sides that are given here, and then the angle that's given here. The tricky thing about this one, not too bad, is that once you plug in this right side, it will give you what, for example, a squared is. And in order to find side A, you would have to find the square root of that number. Now, this is especially for my students in pre-cal. This formula down here is not really given in textbooks. This is a manipulation of this formula, meaning if I wanted to find angle A, I would start by subtracting b squared and c squared, which is where I get a squared minus b squared and c squared. And then I would divide over this negative 2bc. That's why it ends up down at the bottom. And then lastly, I would do the inverse cosine to get a by itself. And that's how these three down here stem from these three formulas up here. All right, let's check out our first example. All right, so here is our first example. The blue is what's given. I've gone ahead and filled that out in our chart here. So hopefully you jotted down what was on the previous screen. And if you can remember, it says that if two sides are given and one angle without there being a match, I don't have both of any letter, then our job is going to be to find the side first. And since I am finding side A first, I'm going to use the formula that started with a squared. I'm going to rewrite that formula for you for a moment. And now I'm just going to plug in the B's, the little C's, and then the big angle A. I'm also going to take a moment and get that squared out of here. Remember, the way we get rid of a squared is by putting in a square root. All right, so now b squared would be 8 squared plus c squared would be 10 squared minus 2 times b, which is 8, and times c, which is 10, times cosine of angle A, which is 120 degrees. All right. All right, now I'm going to bring in my calculator and fill it all in. Make sure you're scooting right after all of those squares, or else you will stay stuck up there in the exponent. All right, and we press enter, and we have that side A is 15.620. All right, let's fill that in. So now our next step, now that we used law of cosine, we have a match. So in almost any law of cosine question, you're going to find yourself doing three things. Let me write those down for you. All right, so here's your next note. Once the law of cosine gives you a match, you're going to use the law of sine to find your next angle, and then the 180 to find the third angle missing. All right, so I always like to go from biggest number to smallest. So I'm going to use this match with C to then find angle C. So remember, if I'm looking for angle C, I'm going to put it in the numerator. Sine of C over 10 equals sine of 120 over 15.62. So now let's move that 10 over. And we get sine of C is equal to 10 times sine of 120 divided by 15.62. And of course, we want to get the C by itself. So now we say that C is equal to the inverse sine of this fraction. So now we go ahead and put that part in our calculator. And we say second sine for that inverse, alpha y equals for the fraction, and go ahead and put in 10 times sine of 120 all over 15.62. Press enter. And now we know that angle C is 33.67 degrees. Okay? Plug that in. And now lastly, we're going to use the 180 rule. So we know that angle B is going to be 180 minus the 120 degrees minus this 33.67 degrees. And you go ahead and plug that into your calculator, and you should get .33. We'll fill that in, and we are done with this question. All right, here we are with example number 2. Here we have the given in blue, and I've gone ahead and filled that out in our chart right here. So this is a scenario where all three sides are given and no angles. So if we refer back to our notes, it says that if all sides are given, find the largest angle first. So some of you may be thinking, how do I know which is the largest angle? A quick refresher from geometry. The largest angle is always across from the largest side. So if our largest side is 12, then our largest angle is going to be B. So going back to our notes, we're going to be using the formula where we're looking for angle B. I'm rewriting it real quick for you. All right, so all we're going to do is rewrite this formula with these numbers in the correct spot and then plug it into our calculator. So we have inverse cosine of 12 squared minus 7 squared minus 4 squared all over negative 2 times 7 and times 4. All right. So second cosine for that inverse, alpha y equals for the fraction, and now just fill in your numbers. All right, a big deal with these calculators is they are a little too smart, And they need you to be specific when you are talking about a minus, like what's in the numerator, and when you're talking about a negative, which is what's in the denominator. So all the way at the bottom of your calculator, underneath the 3, you have this negative sign. Make sure you press that one when you're in the denominator. So negative 2 times 7 times 4. Close that parentheses. And we have a domain error. If you remember from last video, a domain error means that this triangle does not exist. And for some of us, it's a nice scenario. It makes the problem a lot shorter. Please do, before you write no triangle on your paper, always go back and make sure you plugged all your numbers in correctly, because that could be the case. But it does mean no triangle. Now I'm going to talk about that for a second. I'm going to pause and draw you a little diagram to help you hopefully understand this a little better. Alright, so I brought out my ruler and drew this diagram for you. There's a rule from geometry I'm going to refresh you on, and it is that a triangle only exists if the two smaller sides add up to be greater than the larger side. Okay? So I give you a little image here. I took the sides of this triangle apart, so to speak, and I drew a 12. Instead of inches, I did centimeters, so you can see it on the paper, and then 4 and 7. So think about moving these lines, and that if I want this point to touch this one and this point to touch this one, ask yourself if these two would be able to touch. All right, but again, that rule is that the two smaller sides must add up to be greater than the larger side. All right, let's move on to another example. All right, example number 3. Here in blue, we have our given information, and I've gone ahead and filled that out here in our chart. So once again, we see that we have all 3 sides given and no angles, and we do not have a match, so we know that this is a law of cosine. So we know from our notes that when we have all 3 sides given, we want to find the largest angle first. Again, the largest angle is found from being across the largest side. So in this example, we will be looking for angle B again. Now, for my students who are doing less memorizing, I did the short version in the last question. I'm going to go the longer way, which does require less memorizing. So if I want to find angle B from my first set of formulas, I'm going to find the one that ends in cosine of B. So the formula is B squared equals A squared plus C squared minus 2AC cosine of B. Okay, let's fill in everything that we know first. So we write 9 squared equals 6 squared plus 4 squared minus 2 times 6 times 4. And we don't know big B, so we leave it just like that. Now, if I want to find cosine of B, I need to start working inverse operations. So remember that when you are working backwards to solve for a variable, you're going to do PEMDAS backwards. So we're going to work with the addition and subtraction first. Do not move this 2 because it is multiplied to the 6 and the 4. So we start by subtracting the 6 squared and the 4 squared first. Next, we divide this negative 2 times 6 times 4. And lastly, to get that B by itself, we do inverse cosine. So we can say B equals inverse cosine of this fraction. So if you do memorize formulas, you would have gone straight to this step. So it depends on you. If you feel more confident with more math work or more memorizing. The option is yours. But we go next to our calculator. We say second cosine for our inverse, and then alpha y equals for our fraction, and then plug in your numbers. Remember down below to use the negative sign, not the minus. And if you're looking very closely, you could even see that the negative sign is a tad bit smaller than the minus. Press enter, and now we know that B is 127 degrees. So we can plug that in. And just like the first question we were able to complete, our next step is going to be to use our match and law of sine to find either capital A or C. Okay? So let's work with A here. I'm looking for an angle, so I'm going to put the angle on top. Sine of A over 6 equals, use the match that I have, sine of 127 over 9. I'm going to move this 6 over to the other side. Sine of A equals 6 times sine of 127 over 9. And to get this A by itself, we are going to say A is equal to the inverse sine of this fraction. All right, let's plug that into our calculator. We have second sine for our inverse and alpha y equals for our fraction, and plug it in. And now we have that angle A is 32 degrees. All right. So up to here we found angle B, and up to here we found angle A. Our last step is going to be the 180 rule. Okay, so now for angle C, I could say 180 minus 127 minus 32, and we get our last angle, which is 21 degrees. You find your last angle, and you are done with this question. All right, that's it for law of cosine. Have a good one.